The morning sun cast golden ripples across the pristine water Crystal Lake as I stood on my dock, coffee in hand, watching a construction barge motor across what had been, until 3 weeks ago, the most peaceful place on earth. My lake. Well, technically our lake, but I'd been here first. 22 years before the Paradise Shores HOA decided to turn my private sanctuary into their personal profit center. This is unbelievable, my wife Sarah muttered, joining me with her own mug. They're actually doing it. The floating restaurant was taking shape in the middle of the lake. A gaudy 2-story structure with bright blue umbrellas and orange siding that looked like a beach resort threw up on a barge. The sound of power tools echoed across the water, shattering the tranquility that had drawn us here in the first place. My property, all 12 acres of it, wrapped around the southern end of Crystal Lake. The previous owner, a reclusive millionaire, had purchased the land in the 1960s specifically to keep it undeveloped. When he passed, I'd bought it for a song, inheriting not just the property but his vision of preservation. The deed included riparian rights to the lake, and, most importantly, the only viable boat ramp for miles. The Paradise Shores development had sprung up on the northern shore 5 years ago. At first, it was fine. A dozen upscale homes, wealthy retirees mostly, who seemed content to kayak and paddleboard. Then came the HOA president, Melissa Thornberry, a former real estate developer with dollar signs in her eyes and a complete disregard for anyone else's peace. Mr. Cooper, a sharp voice called from the road. I turned to see Melissa herself, clipboard in hand, power walking down my driveway in a hot pink pantsuit that matched her aggressive personality. Behind her, a police officer trailed reluctantly. That's far enough, I called out. This is private property. She stopped at the property line, her smile as fake as the blonde highlights in her hair. Mr. Cooper, I'm here with Officer Davidson because we need to discuss your recent obstruction. My what? The boat ramp. You've chained it off. That's illegal. I took a slow sip of my coffee. It's my boat ramp. On my property. I can do whatever I want with it. Her smile tightened. That ramp provides the only lake access for construction vehicles. You're interfering with a legitimate business operation. A business operation you never got my permission for. We don't need your permission. The lake is public water. The lake is private, I corrected, owned collectively by the riparian property owners, of which I control 40%. I voted no on your floating monstrosity. So did the Hendersons and the Chens. That's a majority. Melissa's face flushed. That vote was procedural. The county has already approved our restaurant permit. Based on your false claim that all lake owners consented, I pulled a folder from under my arm. I've got the county commissioner's email right here. He was very interested to learn that you forged signatures, Melissa. Officer Davidson shifted uncomfortably. Ma'am, if this is a civil property dispute. It's not a dispute. Melissa snapped. He's blocking access to navigable waters. Through my private property, I said calmly. Officer, I've got survey maps, the original deed, and 22 years of tax records showing I own that ramp. She's welcome to haul her boats in from the public access point 12 miles down the highway. The officer looked relieved. Sir, ma'am, this sounds like something for courts. I can't enforce property access without a court order. Melissa's eyes blazed. This isn't over, Cooper. That restaurant represents a $2 million investment. You're going to pay for every day of delay. Send me the bill, I said cheerfully. I'll frame it next to your forged consent forms. She stormed off, barking into her phone before she even reached her Mercedes. Officer Davidson gave me an apologetic shrug and followed. Sarah squeezed my arm. You know she's going to make this ugly. It's already ugly, I said, gesturing at the half-built restaurant bobbing obscenely in the middle of the lake. But she made a critical mistake. "What's that?" She assumed I'd roll over like everyone else. The next week was a war of attrition. Melissa filed an emergency injunction to open the boat ramp. I countered with evidence of the forged signatures and filed suit to halt construction entirely. The local newspaper picked up the story. David versus Goliath. Homeowner battles HOA over lake development. Paradise Shores residents started calling. Some were apologetic. They had no idea Melissa had faked the consent forms. Others were furious, having bought their home specifically for the promised restaurant amenities. The HOA board fractured. 3 members resigned. Melissa tried everything. She hired surveyors who discovered the property line was actually 10 feet from where it had been for 60 years. I produced the original surveyor's notes from 1962, complete with stone markers that hadn't moved an inch. She claimed the boat ramp was a public easement. I showed that her own HOA documents referenced it as Cooper's private access point and included fees they'd paid me for occasional use over the years. She even tried to dredge a new access point until the Environmental Protection Agency shut her down for disturbing protected wetlands. Through it all, the restaurant sat unfinished on its barge, anchored but inaccessible, slowly becoming a very expensive piece of lake garbage. The breaking point came on a Thursday morning. I was drinking coffee on the dock, my new favorite spite ritual, when I saw Melissa's Mercedes racing down the highway. She parked illegally and practically sprinted to my property line. "You win," she shouted across the gap. "Are you happy? You win." I set down my coffee and walked over. Up close, she looked exhausted. The power suit was wrinkled, her hair less perfectly coiffed. "The investors are pulling out," she said, her voice cracking. "The delays and negative press, the lawsuits, they're done. We're bankrupting the HOA." "You bankrupted the HOA," I corrected gently, "by lying, forging documents, and building something nobody wanted." "I wanted it," she whispered. "This was supposed to be my legacy, my comeback after everything fell apart in California." For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "What do you want?" she finally asked. "Remove the restaurant, restore the lake, and resign from the HOA. And then I'll drop the lawsuits. The ramp opens again for reasonable use, like it always was." She stared at the water, at her dying dream bobbing uselessly in the distance. "I'll need 2 weeks to arrange the removal. You've got 1 month. Do it right." She nodded, defeated, and walked back to her car without another word. 6 weeks later, Crystal Lake was clear again. The floating restaurant had been dismantled and hauled away. The new HOA board, led by quiet, reasonable people, had issued a formal apology and updated their bylaws to require genuine consent for any lake projects. I stood on my dock in the early morning, watching the mist rise off the still water. A loon called in the distance. Sarah wrapped her arms around me from behind. "Was it worth it?" she asked. "All the fighting?" I thought about what we'd saved. Not just our peace and quiet, but the lake itself, the ecosystem, the character of the place. "Yeah," I said, "some things are worth fighting for."